Welcome yet to another exciting video, in this case episode 3 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series. In this video I'll be looking at season 1 episodes 13 to 17 of Star Trek, the original series or generation, to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. The episode order I'm using is the production order. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of Star Trek, we need to understand the episodes in the order they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can confirm. The episode order information as broadcast is also included. Special thanks to the transcripts which can be found on the Chakotay site. When Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent over the following 3 years. The animated series and early movies retained this consistency in the most part. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with his new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earlier source material. Any historical facts from later sources which contradict the earlier references I have to assume is in error. Minor changes in nomenclature can be excused. The Conscience of the King is the 13th episode of the first season. It was the 13th episode produced. Kirk does mention in this episode there is a shuttlecraft on the Enterprise, but we do not get to see it. This is the first time the shuttle is mentioned in the series. Sygena Minor is an Earth colony. The Enterprise travels to another planet. It's assumed to be another Earth planet, but we are not given its name. There are 2 planets mentioned in this episode. We get yet another planet. Tarsus 4 is also an Earth colony. 24 years previously, the colony suffered a famine, which would be in 2240 AD. The Astral Queen, which is mentioned in this episode, is a spaceship which is supposed to pick up the theatre company. It seems to be part of some form of schedule and looks like a passenger ship, but no details are provided. We get yet another planet. Beneka colony is an Earth colony, which must obviously mean it's human inhabited. The Caridian company was on planet Q. We get another planet where Dr. Leighton was murdered. Dr. Leighton is human, and it's assumed the Caridian company was performing for humans. Thus, it must be an Earth planet. It's possible it was not a colony. The biggest piece of information we get in this episode is the existence of the shuttle, although we do not see it. There is a high probability there is a passenger service between Earth planets. A further 3 Earth colony planets are identified, 1 other Earth planet, and a 5th unnamed Earth planet. Assuming this is the first year of the 5-year mission of the Enterprise, then it's 2264, which means the famine on Tarsus 5 occurred in 2240. The Galileo 7 is the 16th episode of the first season. It was the 14th episode produced. In this episode, we discover that there is the position of Galactic High Commissioner, which has some level of authority over the Enterprise. Clearly not part of what will become Starfleet, but nonetheless some form of civil authority. We get another planet mentioned in this episode. Marcus 3 is a location, or planet, from which some form of transfer will occur to a colony planet. Marcus 3 must be part of the Earth Federation, most likely human, but this is not specifically stated. It's likely to not be a colony, so it could be a non-human member of the Earth Federation as well. More planets. The new Paris colonies are clearly Earth colonies, although it's possible they are not human colonies, although that's rather unlikely. On the other hand, why would a human call a planet a colony unless it was an Earth colony? There must be more than one colony, possibly more than one colony planet, or multiple colonies on a single planet. That's not very clearly, or it's not clarified in the episode, which of the 2 options it is. I'll assume multiple colony planets. We finally get to see the shuttle, in this case a shuttlecraft, a Galileo. More planets. Taurus 2 is a planet capable of sustaining human life. It's not controlled by the Federation and is inhabited by an alien race. It's likely to be within the Earth Federation borders. The Enterprise is equipped with a second shuttlecraft, in this case Shuttlecraft Columbus. This must be the maximum complement, otherwise Kirk would have sent more shuttlecraft out. We get another planet mentioned, Hansen's planet, which is, in this case, inhabited by aliens. Takeaway from this episode is we finally get to see the shuttle, 2 to be exact. We discover two planets which are inhabited by primitive aliens. One is within the human sphere and the second is most likely as well. One has no human settlement, and it's likely human settlements do not exist on the other planet. There is some form of civil authority in the guise of the Galactic High Commissioner. This is mentioned in this episode. The significance of this is the Enterprise is not directly under command of a civil authority. Although the civil authority has indirect control, it's highly likely that the Enterprise is part of a military organisation. While this is clear in the original series, in the Next Generation the Enterprise seems to be more a civilian than military spacecraft in many cases. Court Martial is the 20th episode of the first season. It was the 15th episode produced. In this episode, we get the first mention of a starbase, in this case Starbase 11. It's assumed there is a Starbase 1 to 10 as well. The starbase has the ability to make repairs to starships. It's also assumed they orbit a planet, although possibly inhabited planet on the image, based on the episode information that we get. As the starbase is clearly an Earth starbase, any planet must be also an Earth planet. In the future, pretty much I discovered that a starbase is actually the planet. Anything in orbit is incidental. There is another starship at Starbase 11 called the Intrepid. Clearly the Enterprise is more important, so it may be a smaller warship or a civilian ship. In the updated images from the episode, it looks like another starship similar to the Enterprise. The starbase can only work on one starship at a time. In the episode, we hear about a Vulcanian expedition, which Kirk may have been involved with. If he was 21, the year may be 2247. Could this be the expedition which makes first contact with the Vulcans? This is pure guesswork, and the fact Spock is half human indicates that there must have been Earth-Vulcan contact before the Vulcanian expedition. Most likely it was the first Earth expedition to Vulcan, but that the Vulcans had made contact with Earth before Spock was born. It seems reasonable the Vulcans were in close contact with Earth well before Spock was born to allow Spock's father to meet an Earth woman and marry her. We finally get our first mention of Starfleet in this episode. The episode provides more detail about Spock. He has been decorated by Vulcan twice and by Starfleet twice. We also have the pure logic of the Vulcans raised and the fact Spock is half Vulcan. We also get some additional details about McCoy. He's been decorated 3 times, once by Starfleet surgeons. The first use of T as Kirk's middle name occurs in this episode. We still do not know what the name was, but we now know it's T. Kirk has also won a lot of decorations. We discover in the episode there is something called the Fundamental Declaration of the Martian Colonies, which implies there are Martian colonies. This implies that Mars was colonized by Earth and has a status which allows it to have colonies. These colonies are, most likely, in other systems. It's possible these colonies were in the asteroid belt, or the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, but this is unlikely as these would have been colonized by Earth well before Mars had the ability to colonize anything in the system. We also discover there's something called the Statutes of Alpha 3. It's possible this was a planet at Alpha Centauri. In this case, the planet was numbered 3. We know that there are about 5 Alpha colonies, and as Alpha Centauri is a binary or trinary system, this is highly likely. Whether Alpha 3 is a colony or an independent system in the Earth Federation is unknown. The Earth Federation has at least 11 starbases, if not more. These are clearly designed to provide repair and maintenance for Earth starships. We are provided the names of a starship, or another starship, in this case Intrepid. While less important than the Enterprise, this does sound like the name of a warship. Earth sent an expedition to Vulcan sometime before Kirk assumed command of the Enterprise. We are uncertain what it was for, but it's possible this was the first expedition from Earth to the planet Vulcan. We first hear of Starfleet, which controls the Enterprise and the starbases. We know, or we strongly suspect, that Mars was large or powerful enough to have its own colonies. It's possible Alpha 3 is the most powerful planet in the Alpha Centauri system, of which up to 5 planets may be colonized. This represents a lot of population and power. While this is total speculation, Mars was colonized and became powerful enough to have its own colonies. If correct, it would take at least 100 years, if not longer, for a planet to be terraformed and colonized to the point where it could send out colonies of its own. As it's currently 2266, it's possible the colonization of Mars may have started by 2166, if not earlier. As Mars would have created its colonies well before 2266, it's likely the colonization of Mars occurred well before 2166, perhaps before warp was invented in 2060. The first federation may well have been between Earth and Mars, although this was still called Earth, as everyone was human and descendant of Earth regardless. Alpha 3 is also interesting as the context of this reference is describing a legal system. It implies Alpha 3 was not a colony and was instead autonomous. If this speculation is correct, the colonization of Alpha Centauri probably occurred well before warp drive was invented. This reinforces the idea that early impulse drive, or power, was providing faster than light speeds. Back in 1960, I guess people may have thought the solar system would have been colonized well before 2060, and that some exploration of the closer system may have occurred before warp was invented. The Menagerie, Part 1, is the 11th episode of the first season. It was the 16th episode produced. In this episode, we return to Starbase 11. It seems that Starbase is the whole planet and not just a base in space. In this case, this represents a planet dedicated as a military base. Similar, I suppose, to the old British ports like Hong Kong, Cape Town, etc., which supported its military around the world. Starbase 11 does have its own shuttle, in this case, Shuttlecraft 1. It's possible it has more than one shuttlecraft. The shuttlecraft is powered with an ion engine power. In this episode, we're introduced to the former captain of the Enterprise, Christopher Pike. He has been badly injured in an accident on an old Class J starship. Clearly the starships have a class nomenclature, and the Enterprise is the most current starship. The Enterprise is supposed to be a Constitution class, so the naming convention may have changed, or the Class J starship is a smaller, more numerous type. Harry Mudd has a Class J cargo ship, so there may be a link. It's likely Pike was injured in the first year of the Enterprise mission, perhaps 2264. Spock served for 11 years, 4 months, 5 days under Commander Pike. This likely started in 2252 and ended in 2263. The following year he was reporting to Kirk. In this episode we are reintroduced to Talos 4. Visiting it is forbidden and punished by death, the only crime which warrants the death penalty in the Federation. Starfleet is also mentioned in this episode, and, for the first time, we get the mention of a general order. We learn that there is only one crime which warrants the death penalty, which is visiting Talos 4. In summary, we discover starbases have shuttlecraft which have ion engine power. As the shuttlecraft was able to follow the Enterprise, it must have faster-than-light capability, so the term ion engine power is related to the power source only. It must have some form of warp capacity or even FTL impulse capacity. The starbases must be an entire planet, which means there could be at least 11 planets within the Federation dedicated as military bases, if not more. The Menagerie Part 2 is the 12th episode of the first season. It was the second part of the 16th episode produced. The Enterprise was the only Federation ship to visit Talos 4. The mission occurred 13 years ago, which makes no sense, unless the Enterprise had a major refit, which took at least 2 years, if not more. In this episode, we obtain more information about the Orion slave girl. They are not as passive and as submissive as the original pilot episode depicted them. The only really significant piece of information was concerning the Orion slave girls, who apparently are like animals, vicious, seductive, and impossible to resist. This places a different slant on the green-skinned slave girls. Instead of being passive, they are actually proactive and aggressive. We also discovered that Pike's mission to Talos 4 occurred 13 years ago. This doesn't make much sense. We know that Kirk takes over from Pike and that Spock served with Pike for a bit over 11 years. There is a 2-year gap which is not explained. It could be the Enterprise went into an extended refit lasting for 2 years or more. I'm uncertain what the answer is, but that's the only theory I have at the present moment. Shore Leave is the 15th episode of the first season. It was the 17th episode produced. In this episode, the Enterprise finds an Earth-like uninhabited planet in the Omicron Delta region. The series often use region for system, so I'm assuming this is a system with a star in the centre and planets orbiting it. In the episode, we discover the Enterprise has a crew of 430, which, once we include Kirk, it's a total of 431. Considering the Enterprise is a capital ship, this is not a big crew. On the other hand, a lot of the work would be automated, so there would be no need to have a crew as large as, for example, a World War II cruiser. Clearly, the Federation allows crews to take shore leave on uninhabited and unexplored planets. They must be very far away from any Federation planet to do such a risky thing. We discover in this episode Kirk had a girlfriend called Ruth 15 years ago. This would make it 2249. We are introduced to the tricorder in this episode for the first time, and this can analyse objects and get all sorts of information. The Enterprise has stumbled across an amusement planet for an advanced race, although no detail of the people who built this are provided. This is because humans would not understand, whatever that means. It's possible the original inhabitants left in 600,000 BC, based on the inhabitants of the planet which held the Guardian of Forever. This is based on the animated series, as in this episode it seems like the inhabitants are still around somewhere. However, if this is the case, why is there no one else on the planet? We later learn the builders are actually gone, so perhaps they are the same people as those from Sargon, perhaps, only a guess. Rigel 2 is mentioned, it's another planet. As the girls on the planet are human, this must be a human planet. It may not be a colony when McCoy visited it because it had a pleasure section. In summary, we discover an uninhabited planet and are given the name of another human inhabited planet, in this case Rigel 2. We know no Federation ship has ever visited it before the Enterprise got there, and it's likely this is located beyond the Federation territory. It's possible no race of a similar level of development to the Federation have ever visited it. Otherwise, how could such a misunderstanding occur in the episode as it did occur? The planet itself is uninhabited and used as an amusement park by a species so advanced humans would not understand them at their present level of development, which probably means the Federation will need to advance significantly before they reveal themselves, or they may be gone. The Enterprise must have travelled far outside Earth territory in order to allow shore leave on an unexplored planet. We also discover the Enterprise has a crew of 431, which is not much. As indicated, a World War II German light cruiser would typically have a crew of between 600 and 700. This makes me think the Enterprise is not a capital ship and is instead something closer to a cruiser, which makes sense considering the mission it was on. Of course, later it was clearly identified as a capital ship, so this may be the largest ships the Federation has. Kirk also has a girlfriend called Ruth, and he had this relationship 15 years ago, and he still has very fond memories of it. The tricorder is first mentioned in this episode. It has the ability to analyse an object to determine its composition. There is another race which built and uses the planet in the Omicron Delta region as an amusement park. No details of the race are provided, and this confirms the Enterprise must be outside Earth-controlled space. Later in the animated series, the planet creators are long gone, which makes a lot more sense. If this race is similar to the Guardian of Forever's race, then they may have disappeared 1 million years ago, but this is purely a wild guess. Whatever occurred, whoever the race was, I suspect that they disappeared a long time ago. Many of the latter Star Trek movies and shows do not align with the original vision of the series. This is common in real history, as later historians attempt to change the past in order to justify their beliefs in the present. As I personally enjoyed the original vision of Star Trek, I would hope future material would come back to its original roots, but I severely doubt that will ever happen. And so this concludes episode 3 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series, in this case covering season 1, episodes 13 to 17. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.